Hello, I'm Scott Soshnick.
And I'm Eben Novi-Williams, and this is the No Betting Allowed Sports Business Podcast, the Sporticast.
I thought it was the no decor allowed sportscast because my God, we're in our new digs and you're in a different place than I am. But our kind of studio is under construction, nothing behind me. You're in some room somewhere, nothing behind you. This is really terrible visuals.
If you're watching this on YouTube, which I encourage people to do because Scott and I have such photogenic faces,
that's right.
You'll see that there is just white behind both of us. But at some point soon, hopefully, we will get professionalized background in addition to all the other.
In the old office, we had the LeBron on a bike picture. I didn't realize how big it was on the wall, but now that it's here on the floor, leaning against the wall, this is a very big picture.
He's a big man, Scott.
Yeah. I just lost you for a second, but I'm back.
Okay.
All sorts of tech issues going on today, but let's hope we get through it. But at least we're not Adam Silver and Mark Tatum and the rest of the leadership of the NBA. They got bigger headaches than nothing on the walls, right?
Yeah, I made that joke. The NBA stands for no betting allowed. We could talk about a number of different things here, but for starters, for folks who have not heard the news or were a little confused,
where you been?
The FBI on Thursday announced indictments in two separate cases that are related about gambling. One of which was a bet rigging scandal within the NBA that involved an NBA coach and an active NBA player, Terry Rozier, and an NBA assistant coach, Damon Jones. And then the poker scandal also involved the same NBA coach, that's Chauncey Billups, and a whole host of other people who were running an illegal poker ring, or an illegal and illicit poker ring, defrauding some of the other people. I think the basketball one is the interesting thing here, Scott, and I think there's been a lot of overreaction here, and a lot of people who don't really understand legalized gambling and illegal gambling and what happens if you get rid of one and not the other. But suffice it to say, the top line, I agree. The NBA already has its own issue with what's happening with Steve Ballmer and that investigation. To now layer on the most high profile pro sports gambling scandal we've seen since the NBA with Tim Donaghy. Something that you covered. The original kind of big NBA 21st century gambling scandal. This is not a position any league wants to be in. This is something that I think happens in a lot of other leagues as well, but the NBA has been thrust into the spotlight in a major way.
I mean, I got to say, none of it really comes as a surprise. And, you have in clubhouses in baseball, there's warnings, what you can and cannot do, and rookie symposiums. Players are certainly made aware of what they should and should not be doing as it pertains to gambling. That we know. However, the culture of gambling, whether it be sport or poker or whatever it be, is also absolutely interwoven into the fabric of the athletes and the sports leagues that we know too. We know, if you've ever spoken to, and I don't want to single out NBA, but it happens to be the one here in the crosshairs. If you've ever spoken to NBA players about the games that are played for money on the flights, they're legendary. Yeah. I mean, they're legendary. So big dollars, and you had, remember Gilbert Arenas, and he pulled a gun, or and for the gambling debts, and Charles Oakley, and I mean, we've heard about this stuff forever. However, now you have legalized sports betting, and I think the part that you say folks really don't understand is, if you get a tip that says, like, who would be like the most impact, that Victor Wembanyama woke up with a sore throat, they think he has the flu, and the doctors have told him to stay at home for 3 days. So he's going to miss that night's game. Now, you got this information before anybody else. If you go and load up on the opponent of the San Antonio Spurs that night, that will trigger folks who monitor this stuff. They're called integrity monitors. That will trigger somebody's suspicions. It is not so easy to just go ahead and lay large or even small amounts of money on, whether it be individual player prop bets. Anything that is outside of the norm will trigger the monitor.
Yeah, the Jonte Porter situation is a perfect example of what you're talking about, Scott. So Jonte told people, I believe this was a game in early 24, told people that he was going to be leaving in the first quarter. He was going to fake an illness or an injury. He'd be leaving. Basically, a signal
How
that
many people do you think bet on that
all
throughout the
of his
year? Yeah.
all of his unders were going to hit, and his associates placed an $80,000 parlay, parlaying all of the Jonte Porter unders they could find: points, minutes, rebounds, assists. It was supposed to pay out $1.1 million, and it was so suspicious that DraftKings said, we're not even going to pay this money. Like this is so fishy that something is happening here. We're not even going to pay out this money. That was one of the things that led to the initial takedown of Jonte, which was more than a year ago at this point. And then as part of this new round of allegations and information dropped by the FBI, we learned that Jonte was threatened. We don't know exactly how, but was threatened to participate in bet rigging at some point during the times that he was essentially rigging games, not throwing games win or loss, but rigging micro bets within games. And that to me, I wrote this last week, but that to me is the thing that I don't think people have fully grasped yet, is that players eventually pick up what they're going to get caught doing. Right. And the first NFL player we saw betting legally on NFL games was a guy named Josh Shaw. He got caught because on the Caesars reward card, he wrote down that his occupation was professional football player. It sent off red flags.
Oy,
Obviously got caught.
oy.
Players don't do that anymore. The next thing we saw was that there was, you mentioned the signs in baseball clubhouses. There was a lot of confusion and still maybe a little bit of confusion about what players are allowed and are not allowed to do. And we saw a rash of NFL players and some other leagues as well, college players as well, who were suspended for gambling violations, not because they were betting on their team, not because they were betting against their team, not even because they were betting on the sport they play in. They were betting on other sports.
Can't do
that
it.
is not allowed.
Can't do it.
So there were NFL players who I think genuinely were like, oh, wait, I can't bet on NBA from my practice facility. I didn't know that.
Those were players who were not paying attention. I can tell you
Those
that.
are players who are not paying attention. And I think we're getting past that point now. So I'm talking about this as saying there's a lag between what players know and what players think they can get away with and what they can get away with. And we are still, I think, in that zone where there are definitely some players out there who think that, oh, all I'm doing is throwing one pitch in the dirt. No one's going to know. All I'm doing is getting quote unquote injured on one game, and my unders are going to hit, or I'm going to throw a ball in the first pitch of the third inning. But as you said, Scott, that is very difficult to get away with because of how complex the monitoring is. And the Jonte example I gave, $80,000 parlay on all the unders, that's dumb. You're going to get caught for that almost no matter what. But even if you're being slightly more nuanced or even a lot more nuanced, if you have an account, Scott, and you just happen to be basically undefeated betting over unders, even for a small amount of money on one specific player, they're going to know that. If one player who usually sees $10,000 of volume on his or her props suddenly sees $100,000, they're going to see that. The only way really to get away with this in large scale ways, unless you're doing it very, very decentralized across a lot of illegal books, is to kind of launder these into an account that's winning like 51% of the time, an account that's losing on the same player that they are winning on fairly consistently. It just becomes a very hard thing to do. So I think at some point soon, players are going to realize, oh, this doesn't work. Like I can't just tell my friends I'm going to throw a ball in the first.
You're going to have to do it on the unregulated markets, which then comes with its own set of problems. Whereas you suddenly feel you're threatened because you've gotten in deep or whatever it is.
And that's where I think the interesting nuance of what we learned last week, I think is so critical because, as I said, Jonte Porter, it turns out, was threatened because of other gambling losses to escalate his bet rigging at some point. That's basically what we understand from the FBI. And that's the thing that I think is the wild card in all this, is that even if players eventually realize there's no way I can get away with this with me and my friends, there are still going to be people that for whatever reason are trying to coerce or trying to blackmail or trying to get athletes to do this. And if I'm Adam Silver, that's the thing that scares me. That there's no amount of education you can really do that will, because as you said, Scott, gambling is part of the culture. this happens in European soccer all the time. You get people that befriend athletes and get a little bit of information, then use that information to black them for more information, and then next thing you know, they're participating in something that they didn't even realize how they got into in the first place. That's the concern, is that it's easy if you're a gambler to try to rig these games, and coercing athletes to take part in it. If you're a bad person, if you're a mafia member, if you're organized crime, that is actually a fairly enticing proposition. And athletes are going to be caught up in this for decades and generations to come.
Yep, I like the way you said it. If you're a bad person,
bad person,
and
catch-all term. If you're a bad guy.
And today's naive segment brought to you by, I'm not sure who would sponsor a naive segment, but of course, then Eben, if this is happening, well, then surely all of the sports leagues will decide to turn away the revenue that's being brought in from the DraftKings and the FanDuels of the world, right? I mean, that is surely the next step of all of the commissioners. They will say, you know what, this has become too problematic for us. We are going to eschew the revenue that we have enjoyed the last few years, and we are going back to the way it was. That is absolutely the way it's going, right?
Scott's crystal ball, undefeated. Yeah, I mean, not only will that not happen, I would argue that is not what should happen here, right? Pushing all of this back to the black market. Players have been probably rigging little micro bets like this since these bets have been around. We know about only a small sliver of those that have happened. Pushing all this back underground to the illicit and black markets does not solve this problem, right? In some ways just makes it a little bit more opaque. I don't think it's a coincidence that some of these biggest scandals we've seen, I mentioned Caesars, I mentioned the DraftKings Jonte Porter bet, FanDuel involved in one of the ones that the FBI poked out as well.
What were the 1919 White Sox? What were they? They were FanDuel? Was that a FanDuel? Was that what they were doing? They were putting it, it was the clubhouse.
The Penn ESPN comment.
That's where they were doing it. Right. That's right. That's how they got caught.
Yeah. So
bad Wi-Fi in the clubhouse.
Leagues are not going to give up this money. This is not a problem, I don't think, for legal sports betting. And I think even if you were to ban these prop bets, you're not solving any of this. Again, you're just pushing it back into the illicit market. However, there's something that has to happen, right? This is too hot a topic for fans. If the feds actually do care about this, they are going to be uncovering athletes and their bet rigging for the next 15 years, right? There's probably so much of this happening to various degrees. So if you're Adam Silver, if you're Roger Goodell, yeah, I think at some point you have to do something, and I don't know what that is, but I think
that's the question. What can you? Yeah, what do you do?
Limit the amount of sports betting commercials that exist, right? We're seeing in the UK right now this backlash to the just prevalence of sports betting advertising, and in the Premier League moving forward, you're not going to see sports books on the front of jerseys. So I think maybe
and
there's
I say
something
so
in there.
what that doesn't change it.
What's that?
I say that doesn't change it.
No, it doesn't change it.
Yeah,
no,
that is not the solution to this.
So you're not
issue.
going to give up the money, nor should sports betting become less legal, in my opinion.
But you know how we have to take our. I wonder what this is.
Something to do.
Yeah, it definitely education. I'm wondering. You know how you and I every year we have to take the sort of there's the fishing education. The training and the and harassment awareness and all that. Now I don't want a corny video. However, it would be good for these athletes. Just that there should be no question, even for the athletes that are not paying attention, what you can and cannot do. Like this has to be hammered home. They have to understand. There needs to be an education of folks. You are going to get caught. Don't think like, oh, well, it's just like you said. Oh, it's just me throwing one pitch outside.
Yeah.
The outside forces, the money that is being wagered is so out of the realm of what's normal that the sensors and the triggers the red lights are going off. They need to understand how it works.
I think there is a very robust educational and training. I think those exact videos that you're talking about are things that players in the off season or when you're a rookie are participating in. And yes, I think we are probably a year or two away from this really sinking in. That the monitors are quite talented. They're smart people. They have their hands on a lot of data. This is a very hard thing to get away with. And to me, the bigger education piece, and this is an education needed for athletes as old as time, right? Be careful who you let in your inner circle. That to me is the lesson. It's not directly a gambling lesson, but it's the if you have someone that is stealing money from you or taking money from you or can blackmail you in some other capacity, or you're not even sports betting, but you're playing in this poker game and suddenly you owe 10 grand to someone who will
That's
wipe
the
it
issue.
away
Yeah.
if you're willing to do something else for them, which is pretend your ankle's hurt for 2 quarters in an NBA
Yep.
game. That's the education that I think is needed. And that's a hard lesson to learn. And there have been millions of data points of very smart athletes like Tim Duncan who have been misled, led astray, put into financial difficulty by people that they trusted. And to me, that's the gambling conundrum. It's less about can I get away with this, and more about what happens that leads athletes into this position in the first place.
I remember years ago, I was hanging out with Joe Maloof at the Palms Casino in Vegas. The Maloof family, of course, they used to own the Sacramento Kings. They're part owners, I believe, still of the Vegas Golden Knights. The family controlled the Palms. And we were talking about athletes once, just, hanging around in the casino. And he said, I tell all our players, and who better, by the way? This is the owner of your team who also happens to own a casino in Las Vegas, sitting you down and saying, fellas, for multiple reasons, stay out of the casino.
Yep.
You cannot win. Forget it. He went off. Forget about all the nefarious and whatever that may be. Forget about that. He's like, I make the money from the casino. The casino, the odds are in my favor. But he said, you know why? I may have told you the story in the past, so if I did, just stop me. But he said, you know why he really wants to keep them out? Even if you educate, you sit down and say, here are the exact odds of each game. Athletes, because of how their brains work and their competitiveness, athletes think they can win.
They think
the math doesn't, the math does not matter to athletes. It is, I understand, but I can win. I'm going to beat the game. So there's on every measure, there is reason for athletes to stay out of the casinos.
So one last thing I want to touch on this, because I think this is another nuance that is kind of important. So part of the allegations against Chauncey Billups, who was the coach of the Portland Trailblazers, is that he had tipped off people that basically to the composition of his starting lineup and his roster for a given game. The Blazers were in the middle of tanking by another name. They were resting a bunch of people. They had not publicly announced yet that their roster for that game was going to be significantly worse than what the market expected the Blazers team to look for. They got blown out in that game. And if we are moving towards a world, and I mean, he was criminalizing here in a legal standpoint, because obviously Chauncey Billups should not be calling bettors and letting them know his game plan ahead of time. But if we are criminalizing inside information like that, that kind of dramatically changes the game for a lot of professional bettors, right? There are so many people, folks in Vegas and elsewhere, who are gambling legally, and part of their advantage is getting their hands on information.
It's information gathering. Currency is the information. Sure.
100%. So I understand that the NBA does not want its doctors, doesn't want its coaches sharing this information privately for X and Y. But I think there's a different kind of legal gray area there. And if we're suddenly criminalizing that, that becomes that's a thorny one for me. And I don't know I don't know where that ends up, but I know there are, and I've seen some tweets from folks, but I know there are professional gamblers who are sitting here watching this and being like, wait, some of this is like the way this, like, that's the way this industry works to an degree.
If I know the diner where the players go, if I know the diner where the players go after practice and I happen to be sitting in the booth, I put myself there and then I listen in on the players' conversation, I'm going to act on that information.
Exactly. So some of this, I think, and the government has given shockingly little actual information. There was a press conference, there was a little bit of charging documents, but there was not the full evidentiary dump that typically happens, has not happened yet. So I think a lot of this we kind of have to reserve judgment until we see everything that the feds have, and then obviously hear from folks who are going to defend themselves. I'm very curious to see kind of when all this comes out, where the line of, oh, this person shouldn't be doing this because they're an NBA employee or player, or this person shouldn't be doing this because this is illegal. I'm very curious to see how in the NBA one specifically, kind of how we are willing to draw the lines there, because it reminded me, Scott, that the press conference reminded me a lot of the 2017 FBI press conference
Mm-hmm.
about the college basketball corruption scandal,
Mm-hmm.
in which they talked very broadly about far-reaching frauds across college basketball and illicit payments to players and things like that. With the hindsight of 8 years looking back on that announcement, I think most people in this industry would say that that was a lot of puffery and chest poked out for what was a fairly minor and inconsequential set of violations. And some
Speaking
people
of,
went to
yeah.
jail. They were not big names. The folks who have gone to jail, our colleague Daniel Libet has written about this ad nauseum, really feel like they were railroaded. I think they have a pretty good sense. So this feels big and flashy in the days after the feds come out on the steps and make the big pronunciation or proclamation. But I am curious if, as we get more information, if we start to feel more strongly that this is a huge fraud and the NBA should be worried, or if it starts to tip the other way and suddenly we think, oh, maybe these people are being made an example of in a way that's not fully fair.
Now, who would be a really good person to have that conversation with? I'm excited. Who would be a good person to have that very conversation with?
Mike McCann?
I mean, yeah, he'd be good, but I'd say a little bit better. How about a former federal prosecutor who was also the governor of a state?
Great.
Who, how about Chris
you have one in
Christie?
mind, Scott? Yeah.
I do. How about Chris Christie joining us next week for Invest in Sports? And I will be interviewing Chris, and I'm going to ask him sort of, we have this we just want separation. We don't want politics in our sport, right? You heard, forget about what side of the aisle you sit on.
Yep.
It's just, we don't want, forget it. I mean, you saw an NBA player and coach involved, and there's Kash Patel with the cameras rolling, right? You cannot separate Donald Trump and all presidents at a NASCAR race, at the football game. You cannot separate sport and politics, and I'd love to have that conversation with Chris Christie, at least in part on that.
People should tune in on November 4th or come to the event in person.
Yeah, come to the event.
Scott and
we're going to make some more room. Yeah, we're going to make some more room because the demand has been strong, we'll say.
So one last NBA question before we move on for you, because you've covered the NBA a while and you've covered the union for a while as well.
Yeah.
I'm kind of confused about where the enforcement and punishment mechanism from the union comes in. And I felt this way about the Kawhi Leonard stuff as well, where I felt like the union has been kind of conspicuously absent in any conversation about what could have, or according to some reporting, appears to be a player whose representatives were actively trying to circumvent the salary cap. And I don't know if Andre Iguodala, who runs the NBA PA, has said anything yet about Terry Rozier, but it does feel like, in addition to this being a headache for the NBA and Adam Silver, this feels like it should be a headache also for Andre Iguodala
of course.
and the union. And for some reason, I feel like look, the biggest buck obviously is the NBA. I don't want to step over that, but it does feel like at some point the union should be weighing in on players who are actively gambling or are fixing matches and things like that as well.
Yes, you're right. I am under the impression that there was a call between the union and the league last week.
Okay.
I believe the union will be very private about whatever they choose, because they do not punish. So they only care about their members.
Why would they not punish it? Because
no. The punish vehicle. I mean, they're dues paying members. They're not going to punish their own members. That would never happen. Any punishment would come from the NBA. They, in the collective bargaining agreement, any discipline is granted to the NBA, and then you will see if the union is aggrieved by the severity of that punishment.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Certainly understand that they want to make sure that they are defending punishment if they feel like it is unjust. But and the Kawhi one may be a better example, because I think you could make an argument that if Kawhi is in his team are guilty of conspiring with a team to circumvent the salary cap, that has effects. That could have effects for other players.
Sure, but the league will punish Kawhi, and they will also punish Steve Ballmer.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but I think you understand what, like, there's just sort of part of my brain here that doesn't actually fully get why the union isn't also like, oh, this player violated the rules by which
I believe
all of
they
our
would
members
say,
are expected to uphold, And
Yeah,
as a
that's not going
result,
to
we have
happen.
something to say on that. Or
No, they're not the enforcement vehicle. That's just not the way the relationship works. They are the defense mechanism, not the. They certainly would say, "Hey, this isn't great for anybody. What are you doing?" But they would not issue nobody's getting kicked out of the union. Nobody's getting fined. There's no infrastructure for that to occur.
so as I said, Jonte Porter, according to the feds, was threatened into some of the stuff that he was doing, and we don't know who did that, what exactly the threats were. That we don't have all those details. But in the event that this is if there is an NBA player involved with another pressuring another NBA player, it just feels like again there is like enough potentially here where at some point I could see this actually being a union problem and a union issue. And again, there's a lot more evidence we need to see before maybe some of that happens. But
I will tell
it
you,
does
the
feel
union
like
does
these
have its
videos are
own head of
flashing.
security. Back in the day, I remember it was Mr. Bob Gadsden was the guy who
Yeah.
ran the. I believe recently deceased too. I think I heard that. But he was the guy who they do have that sort of function anyway internally. But a lot of times it's for where they're going to meetings and things like that.
Yeah, yeah.
It would not be
Like
something on this
executive
level. They would
security
it
and
would
things
gone
like
to
that.
the
Yeah.
outside. Yeah, yeah, for sure. Anyway, that's enough of the, as you say, bad stuff. Man, I I want to call, like, I had heard this, I caught a glimpse, but we just did it in the office, and we talked earlier about sort of the new NHL, about how
Oh
it's
yeah.
getting okay for players, especially young players, to promote themselves, even though the culture of the game has always been team first, shut your mouth, rookie, that kind of deal. But they didn't go looking for this. How, or at least I don't know. But and I had not heard of Judy Jupiter until this morning. I didn't know, but popular, person on the interwebs
Yep.
catches up with Will Smith and Macklin Celebrini, two youngsters, 20 and 19, of the San Jose Sharks when they were in town to play the Rangers. And this thing's gone viral. It's just sort of like, hey, who are you guys? And what do you do? And I think it kind of crossed the Rubicon with the "Are you single?" And then and that conversation happens, and then Will Smith gets up and does a twirl for this woman, who the number of followers I don't know, Judy Jupiter, what she has on
I would think
Instagram.
she has a lot. Yeah, she
You do
seems
your
quite
thing.
popular.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna go right now to the Insta Snap and see if I
The
can
videos
find
are
this.
very wholesome. They remind
Yeah,
me, Scott, of that video of Jay-Z taking the subway to his
the old
concert
lady.
and the old
Yes, no
woman
offense
being
to
like,
her. Yeah,
What's your
yeah,
name? What do you
yeah,
do?" And these, like that one, I think there's maybe an open question about how staged or how genuine
yeah.
they actually are. But like, it's easy to watch these things and smile. And I think exactly to your point, I think it does show in some ways how kind of anonymous some of the stars or budding
Yeah.
stars in the NHL are, where they're sitting in a coffee shop in the West Village outside, and this can happen. And I think you want to see more of this. I think this is good for the NHL. It became, I think
This
Judy
is
went to one of
great
the
for the
games.
NHL. Yeah, and
She went to either the
I
Rangers
can't
or the
find the
Devils
account, by the way,
game.
so I don't want to risk being the wrong account.
All good. Yeah. So she went to one of the games, and I think a lot of people on hockey Reddit and on hockey social media
Yeah.
were like kind of following her engagement here. But yes, I think we want to see more of this. And I think it's good for the Sharks. It's good for both these guys. It's good engagement for the league as well. It's just good, wholesome fun.
It's just good to get out of just the hardcore NHL circle. That's what they have to do.
Yeah.
These young kids have to break out and figure out a way to reach different folks, just casual fans.
And as proof of concept, we were talking about this in the office. Kurt Badenhausen is not a hockey person at
Correct.
all. I don't think he knew the name Macklin Celebrini. He definitely did not know the name Will Smith, but he said he saw it all over his timeline this weekend. He now knows who both of them are. He laughed at it. So that's exactly it. That's the proof of concept, I think, for how these videos, when they do pop up, if they do go viral and are handled properly, yeah, this is great for basically everyone involved.
And it all goes back to the NBA. Macklin's father, of course, is the sort of fitness guru for the Golden State Warriors. So
There you go.
bring that in. You watching the World Series? Close
I'm
up
not
with
watching
that.
the World Series.
No, why not?
No,
Why
I
not?
don't know. I just there's enough going on, I think, right now. But I will probably watch some at some point. We're recording this before Game 3, so right now tied 1-1. I actually really liked a story that our colleague Barry Bloom did on Sportico over the weekend about the just to nerd out for a second about the Toronto Blue Jays contact.
The hitting approach. Yeah.
Yeah, totally different hitting approach than we've seen for teams, at least recently. I saw a video where for game one, when they were introducing all the players and the coaches, kind of the like pregame introductions, the new hitting coach got one of the loudest applauses from the fans there. So certainly Blue Jays fans are very aware that this guy who came in has changed the approach a little bit in a way that's obviously been tremendously effective. But I thought it was a good take. I enjoyed the read. It was kind of thought provoking about the way that baseball is changing. And as everybody talks about the Dodgers and their payroll and salary caps and is the game broken and things like that. I'm always here for, and baseball seems to be particularly good at this, but I'm always here for stories about teams that have slightly less resources. And I won't pretend that the Blue Jays are the Rays or the Pirates, but teams with slightly less resources who find some kind of angle, some advantage, some lever to pull that changes the game, at least temporarily.
I'm just interested in who has staying power, even on the losing team. This goes 6-7 games. It's the same thing we just talked about Celebrini and Will Smith. It's who becomes a household name. And I love, did you see the photo of Guerrero when he was a little kid?
So
like,
good.
That's, yeah.
You can't write
obviously, you get your casual sports fans tuning in for these moments. They see something like that, and it sticks. It's how do you resonate past the games that are being played? So I think more and more we're going to see, and I've said, by the way, years ago, I'm like, the NHL needs to incorporate every hockey parent has video of their kids when they're young playing, skating outdoors or whatever it is. There is no reason during the All-Star game or the NHL finals or playoffs, whatever, that you should not have photos, clips of all these kids playing when they were 10 years old.
Did you watch the Amazon NHL series?
Not yet.
They've got some good home videos of the Kachuk brothers.
Yeah, you gotta have, of course. Yeah, you've seen the highlights. Yeah, yes,
fighting each other.
Yeah, of course,
hitting each other with sticks and things like that.
I saw my favorite clip, and it resonated because I did it when I was young. My son does it now, and I want to kill him. That when you go back to the homes, and now these are NHL players grown, you go back to their childhood homes, there is a fence, a wall, a garage door, something that has absolute blast holes through it where the pucks did the damage. That is a universal hockey thing that every parent feels. And the kid, when when you do it, my father tried to get me to switch to, they were like foam pucks. But I'm like, I used to play indoors, downstairs. I'm like, the foam puck you can't shoot it on the carpet. And that doesn't work. I could only shoot the real pucks. And of course, I put holes in the wall and I got in trouble for it. My son has already gone pucks through the glass part of the garage door. So it's part of the culture of the game. And to see it when you go, hey, this is where I used to play. And then you get the neighbor next door going, oh yeah, every now and then the puck would come over the fence through the window. You're okay with it these days. It's all part of it.
One last thing before we go, you mentioned kind of the blending of sports and politics. Did you catch the tariff ad? The Canadian Ontario tariff?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I didn't watch the game, but Jacob wrote about it in Club Sportico this morning. Ronald Reagan voiceover.
Donald Trump not happy. 10%.
Yeah,
10%.
Influencing this ad seems to be influencing tariff policy in Washington D.C. As insane as that is to say. So yes, not only is the World Series obviously a massive cultural event in baseball and in sports, but we're seeing geopolitical influences under.
That's the question for Chris Christie. Can you separate sports and politics? Who utilizes it? How do they utilize it? Absolutely.
Good luck. He is Scott Soshnick. You can find him.
I have
on
no
Twitter
music. I should.
Canada, on Twitter at
our home and native land.
The show is produced by Justin
True
Thank you very much to Justin.
Love in all thy
Palacio,
sons
Sebastian Milo,
come
and Carol Winston would like
with
to know that you can follow the
glowing
show
hearts
at
we
Sporticast,
see
which is
thee rise, the true north,
the
strong and
Sportico
free,
Media
from far and wide, O Canada, stand on guard for thee.